Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel Curly-n-Yarny. As always, I am Milena and in today's video we're going to be weaving and finishing a very nice baby boy blanket. So let's get started. 2 weeks ago, I shared a video in which I warped and started the weaving of a baby boy blanket. The theme for the blanket is the same theme as his bedroom, which is the sea. During that first video, I talked through all the details about the warping and the project. So I will link this video right here, but also down below if ever you didn't have the chance to check it out already. So in today's video, I will be focusing on the weaving and the finishing of the blanket. But I still want to give you a little bit of an insight of what I'm doing for this blanket. So I'm using a yarn from a Lion brand from their Feel Like Butta collection. This is polyester yarn and it's very soft to the touch. I am also providing all of the pattern for this blanket for free on my website, so I will link that down below. Just as I will link also a link to get the same yarn, so everything you might need, every question you might ask would be answered in the description down below, so feel free to check it out. Today I have a very big and loaded video, so let's just get started right away. The idea behind the pattern of this blanket is to have a bit of a random pattern. So already in the warp I have a place where there's Houndstooth, I have a place where there's purposely for a plaid effect and also some stripes, and I hope that this random effect would also translate into the weaving because nothing there is really centered except maybe the Houndstooth in the middle, but everything else is free for all. So first of all, I will try to replicate what I see in the warp into the weft, and I will have a warp left at the end in order to be doing a bit more random stuff. So there you have it. Alright, so now I have woven about 4 inches and 3/4 with the light green. So I would be ready to move on to this stripe here, which is made out of the blue. Not out of the blue, but out of the color blue. This yarn is the easiest yarn to change colors with because it is thick and it doesn't ply, and so of all the methods I know of in order to change colors while weaving, this is the one that is the less subtle, so I will want to try to do it as little as possible. So for this reason, I will be keeping this yarn attached to the loom. Sometimes it won't be possible, but for this time I believe I will be able to do it. So this stays on the loom and I'm going to add this yarn. So I'm now inside of the up position. Alright, so I will be showing you how I did this yarn transition a few other times. I have other stripes like this later on, and now what I want to show you is how I'm going to manage the working shuttle and the waiting shuttle. So what I want to do, I want that with my working shuttle, so the one I'm currently using, I want to grab onto the yarn on my waiting shuttle in order to bringing alongside the edge, and so this way this yarn will simply follow the path, and when I'm ready to weave with this one again, it will be there waiting for me. So I'm going to take this one, make it simply go underneath it. This would have for effect to just kind of loop it around. So I can now throw the shuttle in, wishing I had another longer shuttle, but it's fine, it will still work. So now, as we can see, the yarn has been grabbed, it's been placed on the side, and I can beat. So I use this way of grabbing the waiting yarn along the edge in many different techniques. I know that in this specific place the selvage will look a little bit bulkier than in other places on the blanket, but I find it pretty subtle, so for me that's a good compromise in order not to have to cut this yarn. So now let's weave one more pick. Put that in the up position, and yet again with this shuttle I'm simply going to grab onto this yarn and I'm going to throw it in. Ah, didn't work. I'm going to throw it in, try not to make any floats. So I have 6 blue threads in the warp. I now have 6 picks in the weft. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut the blue yarn. I won't be using that weft yarn for a while, so I cut it. And now this was woven inside of the down shed, so I'm simply going to put that back inside of the same shed. So you can see here it is loose, that's the same shed. If I put it back in just like that, this will unweave because it has not grabbed onto anything. So I'm just going to pull it out again. Then I will take this, find the thread that is at the farmost end of the warp, so this would be this strand. I go around it, then I put the thread back inside of the shed and I let it out like this, and then I beat. So now the thread is all squeezed inside of the same shed, so even though this is kind of doubled, it won't show as much because it is close to the edge but also inside of the same shed. So now I'm back inside of the up position. My green yarn has traveled all the way here, so now it can be easily woven. So now I can keep weaving with the green until I get to this yellow stripe. And then we're going to do the same thing but with the yellow yarn. Alright, so I have woven 10 picks with the light green, and this corresponds to the 10 warp threads, so I'm really aiming to have something similar to the warp. So now that this is done, I can now move on to this stripe here with the yellow yarn that I have on this shuttle. So I will be doing the yarn transition exactly the same way that I did the blue yarn. So first I need to find the beginning of this yarn, which I think it's here. It is, okay, there we go. So first I put my heddle inside of the up position. This is where I was at. I take the shuttle and I throw it in. Once the shuttle is all the way through, I leave a bit of tail and I beat. So here again, since this is in the same position that I wove that, I will need to have it grab onto the edge because otherwise it would unweave. So I simply go around this thread here that is the outmost thread of my warp. Then I throw that thread inside of the shed. I do the 2 steps kind of simultaneously, but we can say the thread is now wrapped around the edge and inside of the shed. I let it go out and then I beat. So now the whole yarn is squished inside of the same shed. Alright, so I have now woven the 6 picks of the yellow yarn, so I will cut it and leave it there. Oh, put that away. And now I want to weave that in. So let's take a second to appreciate the selvages. So even though I carried the yarn on the selvage, it is a little bit bulkier, but that's really just something that is very subtle. I like the effect. I really don't think it's too much. As for the yarn, when we change the yarn color, well, we see it a bit more. It's not the most subtle thing. When it's wet finished, of course, it's going to hide a bit more, but we're still going to see a little bit of it. But this yarn doesn't really give me any other choices than that. So now let's keep weaving with the green yarn. This yarn I find very easy to use, easy to warp, it's easy on tension. If there's, however, one thing I can say about this yarn is I find that it would be easy to squish it by beating. So when I weave with this particular yarn, I feel like I really need to be mindful of my beating. Otherwise, I would tend to beat too hard and it would be very dense fabric. It will most likely be a warp, will most likely be a weft face fabric, which is not what I want. Alright, so I have now woven about 3.5 inches of light gray, so I can now store this shuttle away because I won't be using it for quite some time, because I have now reached the middle of the warp where I have the Houndstooth pattern, and this pattern is woven with the blue and the light gray, so we can get to this. Alright, so now that the first thick stride of blue is done, I can actually really start the Houndstooth pattern. So the Houndstooth pattern is very easy. There is 2 warp threads of each of the colors, and I will be weaving 2 peaks of each of the colors as well, and this is what will create the interlacement of the Houndstooth and this iconic pattern. So I will just need first to fix the gray yarn, and then I will be juggling with my shuttles. I will be fixing this yarn exactly the same way that I fixed it when I was doing the big stripe at the beginning of the blanket. And now I can be weaving with the blue yarn. I've done a whole other video where I am weaving Houndstooth in dish towels, and I'm actually doing that pattern with the same colors basically, or very similar colors. If you want to learn more about how I carry the yarn on the selvage to create better looking selvages, I recommend go watching this video. So I will be doing the same technique here, but I don't want my videos to be too redundant. So I will link this video up here, but also in the description down below. So feel free to check it out. For now, I will just keep weaving. Alright, so I have now done 7 rows of gray in the Houndstooth pattern, and I have 7 stripes also in the warp, so this is a wrap. Alright, so now I have woven another 6 peaks of the blue in order to really finish the square around the Houndstooth. So this is done, and I will now be ready to keep weaving with the light gray. So I will be doing another a way to transition the colors. This method, I've showed it in my video in which I talk about the different techniques that I use in order to change colors. So I will also link this video down below. So I've already cut the blue yarn, so I left the tail so this shuttle can be thrown away. So the last pick that I wove was in the up position. So now I'm going to go inside of the down position. I'm going to put my yarn inside of the shed so that I have changed shed. I don't have to make it go around the last thread of the selvage. It should not unweave. So I want to do a transition as ideally closer to the selvage, because this is where it will be a bit less visible. So I'm about 1 inch inside of the project. So that one's woven in. I'm going to add my green yarn. So first I'm just going to weave the pick. So I'm still inside of the down position. I've just woven the end of the other color in. So now that's actually the real pick for this shed. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to, here this thread goes out about this way. So about maybe 4 warp threads before, I'm going to take it out this way. I'm just going to let it go out a little bit, like that, so the pick will not be all the way through the shed, but that's okay. So the shed now will have only here, I'm going to beat and show you that, so only here where the two threads, the two colors cross, we have something that is a bit bulkier, where we have like 2 threads adding up inside of the same shed, but other than that it's all very thin. So now I can just keep weaving. It looks weird for now to have a gray yarn that's not all the way through, but as soon as I will weave the new pick, you'll see it's going to fill the gap, and we won't even notice that much that it had a little bit of a transition here, especially once it's off the loom and wet finish. This will all be a bit more invisible. Again, the transition I can do with the yarn, with this particular yarn, are never fully invisible, but they still do the trick. So throughout the video you will notice that I use 2 different techniques in order to change the yarns and do the different yarns transition. The reason why sometimes I use the first one or the second one is normally a strategic move in order to have as little tail as possible whenever it was possible. So whenever I use the first method is because one of the yarn I was transitioning could actually be staying on the loom, like for example with the green yarn that stays mostly all the way through the project. And whenever I use the second method with the overlapping yarn, well, this is when I really didn't have the choice. I had to cut the first yarn and put on the second yarn, so then I had to do this method. So both are great. If you want to do only the second one, that's fine too. For me, it's really just a way to kind of avoid having too much tails in my project. I've now woven about 2 inches of green, and this actually sums up the whole warp pattern into the weft. So I've now really woven everything I see here inside of the weft. So I have reached about 34 inches and a half, so I believe I have close to 10 inches left on this warp. So with that in mind, those last 10 inches, I want them to be more freestyle. So I've mentioned earlier that this should be a kind of a random pattern inside of this project, and this is where it will truly come true. So I just want to have fun and just go with the flow. So for the first few inches, I want to weave Houndstooth again, but this time I want to use the blue, of course, and use the yellow instead of the gray. So let's see how this will look. So I did 5 times the Houndstooth pattern, and now I am back with the green yarn for a few picks. And then I played around with some stripes of blue, and I'm reaching the end of the warp, so the rest will all be green, and this way the beginning and the end of the blanket will match. So matching by meaning that there's a big stripe of green. So let's finish this. Alright, so here is the final blanket. It is so soft. I'm super happy with how it turned out. I really like the pattern too. It is very subtle, very soft. I wove for about 45 inches, and afterwards finishing the blanket was exactly 40 inches long, so that was exactly what I was trying to get with this. Also the width, it shrank a little bit, so quite a lot. So the final width was 69 centimeters or 27 inches, but I still think that this is a very good size blanket to put on a stroller, for example. So this would be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making this project. I feel like I could be waving baby blankets all the time. So I hope to see you again very soon. Bye bye and take care.